Expanding our knowledge through those amongst us is a privilege we take for granted. Join me as we explore the minds of our fellow beings to unlock their knowledge for ourselves. It is time for a guest entry. But first, a quick disclaimer. Most of the guests I've had on were recorded through Discord due to us being long distance. If the quality dips, it's due to my connection. But I hope each of these conversations brings you new knowledge of the creative and cultural arts. You all know how much I love tabletop RPGs. And it just so happens I've come into contact with another developer who has made a rather simplified system inspired from Pokemon. Dicebag Games is an artist, game developer, world builder, and occasional VTuber. His current project is the Crytures Tabletop Roleplaying Game, and actually, the beginner module has just been released. You can check it out and support him at the links found in the description of this episode. With that being said, here is our conversation. Today, I have on a fellow tabletop RPG developer, world builder, and something that I lack, an artist, Dicebag. If you can tell the audience a bit about who you are and what you're working on.
Hey, I'm Dicebag, like you said, artist, game designer, world builder, and occasional VTuber, but that's a minor thing compared to the others. And right now I'm working on a tabletop RPG that's heavily inspired by Pokemon called Crytures, and that is spelled with a Y instead of an EA because we like to be fancy. It's actually a portmanteau of crystal creatures, kind of like pocket monsters. So that's where that came from.
Yeah, I really like that concept. Instead of the Pokeball, you have like actual crystals that like the creatures actually go inside, and then the world building that you do with that's pretty cool. I like it. So let's go to the beginning. How did you get on this journey that you're on with like creating a tabletop RPG and like not just a tabletop RPG but all your games and your entire world? How did you start?
I mostly started by thinking I could do better than what the other guys are doing right now.
That's how I started too.
Yeah. Sometimes if you want something done right, you got to do it yourself, right? Yeah. The main driver for that was Magic the Gathering. Actually, I was way into that for a long time, probably more than a decade. And, as things went on, it was hit hard by the whole social justice infiltration, along with Wizards of the Coast in general. But D&D didn't really feel it until later.
Yeah,
but you could see it happening.
I also heard that
Magic.
I also heard that Magic got like a huge power creep going on, where like all the cards. Basically, power creep is when like new mechanics come out and it just continues to get like overpowered to a point where it breaks the game, and then it's like there's no reason to use the old cards. Now you're using the new cards because of that.
Yeah, there's some of that, but I think part of the problem that I had with Magic and the direction it went is that they had a big shift from like having a fairly even spread of power amongst the set to shifting like all the power towards the higher rarities. And ultimately what that means is that most of the cards you're getting out of packs are just completely useless garbage that you're not going to use it outside of anything besides like a limited environment.
Yeah.
Which I don't care for.
So you also have a a card game as well, too.
Yeah, that was the answer to Magic.
Mm-hmm.
It's on the back burner because I'm not super great at marketing and I don't really have a following, but I made it anyways. So I'll probably jump back into that at some point.
Yeah, I
right
did.
Now,
I did watch the video, the how-to video for that.
Oh yeah.
I honestly need to get onto YouTube and starting to do like how-to videos and all that stuff, because my game is pretty complex. A lot more complex than what you have. Yours is so easy. Just follow the rules and then create a character. Like that was really good. So when you started working on Creatures, you were inspired by Pokemon. And did you have the same feel, like you could do better than what Pokemon had, or
to a certain extent, yeah, but like clearly it's a very different game.
Yeah. Yeah,
it's not a video game.
Yeah.
But it's also, I guess I've had other ideas for tabletop RPGs floating around.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of the one that I felt like I could make work. And it happened to be around the time where, Sword and Shield were coming out for Pokemon, and that was a massive letdown. So that really drove me to say, okay, it's time to do Creatures.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't played a Pokemon game since like the DS was out. And then the Switch came out, and I never got a Switch. So like all the Pokemon games came out on Switch, and I just see people playing them. So I have no idea how Pokemon is now. I know the newest one just came out, the Legends one with Arceus, right?
Yeah.
Did you play that one?
Yeah, I streamed it a couple times actually. Yeah, I actually totally skipped the Switch up until like this year because of that game coming out. And they also made a remake of Gen 4. But yeah, that was the driving force between me getting a Switch. I didn't care about the last generation enough to actually buy a whole new console.
Yeah, yeah. So let's go on to Creatures.
Yeah.
The world that you've created for it. Can you kind of dive into it a little bit? What's it called, and like how does like the whole mythology behind like the creatures work and all that?
Oh, okay. I don't really have a name for it specifically. I have a hard time naming things like that. But as far as the mythology, I want to keep it a little bit vague.
Okay.
But I kind of have a general idea of where things came from. Mm-hmm. And I guess the gist of the thing is that it's almost like post-apocalyptic in a way, but not in the sense of like it's a desert wasteland or something. It's something that's had, like massive natural catastrophes happen to it. Mm-hmm. And being in a magical world, most of those things are leaving like after effects that are magical, and that over time is what caused the creation of these magical creatures, basically. Mm-hmm. That's the basic gist of how the world came to be.
And so what does, so you have the world, and then all the people, this like the small like towns and societies. You have like one specific town, I know. I have it right here. Let me see.
Root Run.
Root Run, yes. That name reminds me just like of Pokemon.
Yeah, it's supposed to.
Yeah.
It's basically conceived of as like the pallet town of the game. It's a smaller place that you can start out, but
And then you also have ancient ruins like that have like been like what were once cities, and then I'm sure they were devastated by natural disasters.
Right. Those are a big feature of the thing because, like I said, the past is kind of vague, so it's meant to leave room for people to kind of create their own things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's for I expect to have kind of I don't know, kind of like different civilizations that all build up that people can explore from the past.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of a future thing I'd like to do. I'm not super deep into that right now.
So when you're mainly focused on Root Run and trying to develop that, and then the actual beginner module for Creatures, the tabletop role playing game itself.
Right, that's the main focus. I'm trying to get a baseline of the actual mechanical game built up before I really get too deep into the actual like what things exist where and all that.
Mm-hmm. So your whole process is you're developing the game mostly first, and then you're going to build on top of it.
Right.
Yeah. So like I did that. Well, I started out making my game first, and then I built on top of it. But then I realized like my universe is a bit more complex, and there's like a lot of moving pieces. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to like make a foundation for like people to explore, like kind of learn about the universe, and then enter inside it through the game itself. So I'm kind of going the opposite route as you, in a way.
Yeah. Hold on. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. Discord looked like it froze for a second.
Yeah,
anyways,
Discord is a pain for me sometimes.
What was I going to say? Yeah, I'm kind of trying to leave things open for, future dungeon masters and stuff like that. Because I don't like to keep things really specific in the world building, other than like the general rules that the world abides by.
Mm-hmm. And how does how does your game, the actual mechanics kind of like which mechanics kind of dive into the actual world that you're playing in? So like, for example, if you have like D&D, for example, there's all the spells that are mechanically heavy, but then they transfer over to the actual world, and people, like the characters, would know what kind of spell you're using, like the different spell books and the different classes and all that stuff. How does that transfer over in your game?
Well, that's hard to say. It doesn't have really spells in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, if people are using magic like that, it's through some kind of a magical implement or artifact or something. So basically, people will use wands and staves like guns and rifles, effectively. And then a lot of that it's kind of built up through using the essences of creatures to forge these artifacts and stuff. And then a lot of it is kind of rediscovered technology from these ancient civilizations too.
So when you say the essences of a creature, you're talking about when you fight a creature and you kill it, you kind of get the essence of it, or do you kill creatures inside your universe? Like, are they like, or is it more of they don't necessarily die?
They die.
They die. They die.
They die. But it's the in-world like metaphysics of it, I guess, is basically like the creatures are very unstable. So when they die, they basically turn into goo. And then their kind of immaterial part of them just kind of goes back into the general spiritual environment, I guess.
It becomes
and then
one with
kind of like kind of like a reincarnation type of thing. And that's kind of a way I'm making a distinguishment between creatures and humans, is that they are more like recycled elements of the universe, while humans are actually unique individuals with unique souls. And I haven't really implemented that in the game a whole lot, but it's kind of there in the undercurrent of what's going on.
So how many creatures have you had made so far?
Let me get my folder open.
I know you have some great art. Like I enjoy seeing what new creature you're gonna pop out like on Minds whenever I go onto your page.
Yeah, it's pretty fun to come up with things. Let's see. Let's sort this by type.
You also have plant creatures too.
Yeah. Let's see. Ooh. Looks like I got 61 drawn up.
Nice. Wow.
There's definitely more that I haven't fully, drawn up and all that, but we'll get to those later. And I like to have like a full evolutionary line for each type from the very beginning.
Are there mainly 3 evolutions inside yours, or how many evolutions typically?
It's basically like Pokemon.
Okay.
Like 3 is kind of your main good creatures. We'll have 3, but then we've also got like various levels of others. We got some that are just 2. I don't know if I've made an actual standalone creature yet.
Would those be like legendaries?
Yeah, I do have a couple of mythic creatures. I guess those would count.
And you also playtest your game on YouTube as well.
Yeah. We do a stream with some of my friends every once in a while. Haven't done one for a while because I've been
working.
Yeah. I've been making other adventures.
Yes.
Not for them.
Well, I'm excited to test it out. Like when I was making the character, it's very I always forget my word.
Me too, join the club.
Yeah. But it's very just streamlined, a streamlined process. It's very just easy to handle. A lot easier than mine. Like,
yeah, I'm very big on trying to keep things streamlined and simple, or as simple as they can be for a tabletop RPG. You can always,
and also I feel like that's good for the type of game that you're also making, because it's like it's kind of like Pokemon, where like you want it to be. You could actually market this to a younger audience too, and have it like be easily playable by kids in like middle school too.
Yeah, that's kind of part of the intention.
And
there's also
because like the mathematics in it is a lot easier than mine. Mine is probably like a high school level game, I would say. And people who like math, who don't like math, would hate my game.
I'll have to take a look at yours a little deeper sometime. I've seen some of it, but I haven't really.
Yeah, I haven't like really full on released much of the mechanics. I'm working on a way to streamline the process more so. That's what I'm kind of been beta testing recently, and it's like an online version, so you don't have to buy like a huge 200 plus page book. So that's gonna be nice. That's gonna be nice.
Cool. I want to release a physical book sometime of mine.
Yeah. Honestly, I feel like your book would be pretty, like it wouldn't be too thick. It'd be nice and easy to just kind of move through it and read through it.
The basic rules would be pretty thin, I think, but
yeah.
I think the most of it is
creatures.
Yeah, well,
are you gonna make cards for your creatures?
Maybe. I mean, it kind of depends on what I have time to do, but unless you're talking about like an actual card game.
I wouldn't say card game. I'd probably say like just cards, so that people can, like, instead of trying to shuffle through a book to find which creature you want to use,
reference cards.
Yeah.
I'd probably have something like that. In fact, I already have kind of that already with the little, I don't know, images I've been posting. I had to kind of streamline that when I was getting on Instagram and putting stuff on there. You have to fit everything into a square.
Yeah, I know. Instagram can be a pain.
Oh yeah,
but I mean, mine's isn't like the best either. Hopefully, they start adding like multiple images per post, because I know that's annoying for most artists.
Oh, for mines?
Yeah.
Mines is crippled by its own inability to do things. Honestly, it's so good at what it does, but there's a lot of things it doesn't do.
So, would you be willing to go through kind of like the character creation process in this podcast?
Sure. So, let's see. Let me get my document up. There it is. There we go. So yeah, the general mechanics and the character creation were kind of heavily borrowed from World of Darkness. So if anyone's played that, they'll probably be fairly familiar with how things work out. We simplified it kind of to a certain extent. They have like 9 different stats for you to base your character on, which is insane.
Yeah, I usually just stick to the 6.
I went down to 4.
It's actually it's much easier that way.
Yeah. So, anyways, you start out with your talents, which are basically your natural aptitudes. And what you'll have is they're ranked from 1 to 5. Everybody starts with 1. And then you'll have like 8 points to spend amongst the rest of them, amongst fitness, agility, intellect, and sense. And so you can get 3s straight across the board. You can go like 2, 2, 3, 5, or something like that. So you have a lot of room to play with it. And once you get those figured out, you'll determine all your other little bonuses and stuff, like your health, your mana, your stamina, deflection, evasion, speed, initiative, your experience. That's all based on those basic talents. So then those are all calculated in pretty simple terms, mostly just 2 stats added together. But then we get some of them that's like health is 20 plus fitness times 5. That's the most complex it probably gets. Well, except starting experience. That's 500 plus open parentheses, sense plus intellect, close parentheses, times 50. That's probably the most complex calculation in the entire game.
Yeah.
And it's still basic math.
PEMDAS. It's PEMDAS.
But yeah. Next up, you'll have all your starting experience. Actually, no, we don't use the starting experience yet. First, you get to pick out skills. So it's a pretty simple thing. Again, you pick one skill to be like your best skill, and it starts at level 3. And of course, they go on a rank of 1 to 5, just like the talents. Mm-hmm. That's pretty much how everything is. Then after you get that one, you'll pick 2 skills that will be at level 2. And then you'll have 3 skills that are at level 3.
Level 1.
Basically, yeah, right. Getting my words mixed up. So that's basically your starting spread of what your character is like. And then, of course, the skills, you've got athletics for, like your physical general activity. Mm-hmm. And you've got binding, which is basically your ability to handle creatures and conjuring them and binding them, of course. It affects your ability to actually capture the creatures, as well as your ability to control them if they start to not like you, mm-hmm. which can happen in the game. Then you've got healing, which basically helps you deal with injuries that you come across during your adventures. Mm-hmm. And history, of course, there's lots of ancient civilization stuff and all that, so history is an important thing. Inquiry is just a general thing for kind of being able to get information out of people. So either through, tricking them into saying things, or just chatting them up and getting their loose tongue, or intimidating them, whatever. That's all under inquiry. And then the particular nuance of how you would do these things would be covered by which talent is combined with the skill. Then we got legerdemain. Just sleight of hand, your ability to do things like distractions and pickpocketing, magic tricks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Then there's magic, which is basically... I used to have this actually split into like 2 skills. There was magic and then arcana. And magic was the basically your ability to use magic weapons like staves and wands and stuff. And then arcana was your general knowledge of magic, but I felt like that was too specific for it, so I wrapped those both into magic as the skill right now. Mm-hmm. So that's interesting. That has your ability to, fight with magic weapons, and also your understanding of magic in general. Then the next one is mechanics. So a lot of the ancient civilizations had some level of mechanical technology. So you'll be able to manipulate that with mechanics, and it also handles stuff like lock picking and whatnot. Then there's melee, obviously for melee weapons. And then to go along with the magic skill, the way it has like a secondary non-combat application, I've decided that melee is also used whenever you need to kind of apply force to something. So if you need to break down a door or something, you'll use your melee skill for that. Then we got observation.
That's kind of like perception, right?
Right. It's your ability just to notice things. So if somebody's telling a lie, that's an observation check. If there's something small that you need to see, that's an observation check. So then you got persuasion, which kind of the opposite of inquiry. Instead of getting information out of people, you're trying to get information into people, make them believe something that may or may not be true. And you can do that with subterfuge or arguments or intimidation, depending on what talent you want to apply to that.
That's an interesting concept.
So then there's the range skill, which obviously your ranged weapons. And of course, if you need to like just chuck something, that's going to be a ranged roll to make sure you hit what you intend to. And reflexes. I haven't found a whole lot of like use for reflexes yet, but it's important in that it adds to your initiative.
Yeah, there's always that one. There's always that one skill that like people don't use all the time, but it's like that, like for those specific moments.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to work ways into the game to use it on this beginner module too, and I guess the best way to use it is for like avoiding like traps and stuff like that, which I guess I partly don't use a lot because I just don't find traps to be reasonable most of the time. But that's, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation.
You could have it be like where like a creature comes to attack them, and one of the creature's abilities causes them to have to roll in a reflex like check, kind of thing.
I tend to think that's covered by the defenses mechanism, because whenever you roll an attack, you're hitting a target which represents their defenses, which would be deflection or evasion, depending on if it's like, you know, physical or magical, basically. But anyways, next one is stealth. Just generally your ability to avoid being noticed. And of course, you're going to be using that a lot if you're out in dangerous territory with wild creatures everywhere.
Yeah.
And then survival, just your ability to find necessities in the wild, like food, water, shelter, firewood, and then your ability to just get around and know where you're going. And then last but not least, you got zoology. That's just your general knowledge of creatures and how they work and how they behave. So yeah, that's the skills. That took a lot longer to read through than I expected.
Hey, you have less than me, so don't worry about that.
Yeah, well, after that, you get to spend your starting experience finally. And you can spend that on your buying new skill levels, of course. But you also have abilities, which you can buy, which are kind of like feats in Dungeons and Dragons, maybe. That's kind of the equivalent. But of course, they're ranked from 1 to 5, but they also are not fully all 1 to 5, and some of them actually start at like 2 or 3.
And you don't have a class system or anything like that.
Not for characters,
but for creatures specifically.
For creatures, yeah.
Okay.
Like the thing is, classes are kind of a very modular concept in here. I might actually come out with classes for characters at some point, but I don't really feel that it's a core thing.
I feel
that
like
needs to be in the game.
I feel like if they were classes for characters, it would be like more like build types, like how you might want to build a character to be a specific way in the world, kind of thing.
I thought maybe classes would, well, they'd probably just be modeled after the creature classes in that they have certain combat powers that they get along the way.
That would be cool.
Then some flat bonuses.
Yeah.
But that's definitely something for later on down the road. And it might step on the toes of abilities too much.
Yeah.
Or maybe I'll just make them abilities. Could be either way. But anyways, you got stuff like armor proficiency, which reduces the amount of your carrying capacity that your armor counts against. You got fast healing, reduces the time you heal from energies. Mm-hmm. You can increase your mana and your stamina, things like that. We got a few that can give you actual combat abilities. And then there's other things like, let's see. You got one that lets you summon a creature as a minor action instead of a major action. So there's a lot of little ways to customize your characters, and I'm definitely going to be making more of them as it goes on. Mm-hmm. Because there's so many little mechanical niches you can work out later on in the system, especially this complex. And then, of course, there's professions that I intend to have, but they're very beta right now. Or maybe even alpha. This is going to be the crafting of the game.
Yeah.
And I'm not entirely sure how I want it to work or how I can manage the resources properly. Mm-hmm. It's going to take a lot of trial and error.
You got to figure out the economy of the game too.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah. I feel like also like when you're doing like economy, it is based off of the game master too, and how
that's definitely a big thing.
Yeah, and how they might want to do it, and they can decide whether or not it's going to be like it's more expensive or it's less expensive based off of where they're starting and all that stuff. All the nuanced perspective, you know.
Yeah, that's one of the kind of tricks about dealing with tabletop RPGs is that there's so much house ruling and hand waving and people doing things their own way that it's kind of like, oh, okay, I can make all these rules, but are people going to follow them?
Yeah. It's more like you set up the structure, and then you say like, okay, practically every rule is optional at a certain point, but then at that point you're going to end up wanting to just build your own system.
Yeah.
So like having the system there and then tweaking the rules based off of the table and having a general consensus there is nice.
Yeah, I think my basic philosophy with that is just to kind of, if something could be abused, I make a rule for it. And then if people want to follow that rule, then that's what they do. Then if somebody tries to abuse the lack of the rule, then, well, you've got a rule. You can just obey the rule. And no abuse, supposedly.
What I like doing, so because my system is so complex, there's parts of it where I don't necessarily say, like, I don't make a rule against something. I allow something to happen so that people can potentially break the game, but that's only if they can find how to do it. And so far, no one has found out like the best ways to truly create the character inside my game, because there's so many moving pieces that it's hard to find what is going on. I mean, my game isn't crazy complex when you actually play it. Like it's complex when you build the character because there's so many options that you could choose from. But when you play the game, it's like you're playing D&D kind of situation. You'll have more choices to choose from, but like you're not like having to do one roll for this and then multiple things for this and all that stuff. It's more the difficulty is more so on the game master than the actual players, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had an idea in my head and I completely forgot it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it was while you were talking that came to me.
Yeah.
And let's see what. Oh, what was it? I don't know. You might have to give me the entire spiel again before it comes back. Oh, what was it? I'm starting to forget what you were just talking about. The difficulty of all the moving parts and the interactions and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
That's actually a big thing in card games, is the ability to like exploit certain rules.
Mm-hmm.
And being that from where I came out of, a lot of the creatures mechanics are based on card game design.
Mm-hmm.
Like exception-based design is what they call it. So you've got your basic streamlined rules, and then like each piece of the game like has a little way to break the rules, the basic rules, and then those kind of become rules unto themselves. So that's the general design philosophy I'm following, and it allows for a lot of unusual interactions. And frankly, I'm not sure if the players I'm testing with have the experience to make use of that. So I kind of wonder if I might have broken the game already and not know about it.
Because the players have yeah. That's like that's the hard part, is like you need to find players who will literally test the boundaries of the game.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had those players, and like there was one time, I had it was a previous iteration of my game, like before I even had this game, but like my game is all about like power and all that stuff, because it's reborn in power. But like it was all about power before, and like basically you could choose whatever power you wanted, and like you'd have like a superpower or something like that, and you would use it. And then my brother comes to play, and he's like, okay, so I can have any power I want. Okay, I want omniscience. And then I'm like, okay. And then he's like, I'm just gonna create this, and then I'm gonna do this, and then I'm just beat the game. Like, okay, well now I have to actually like put like limitations on you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Well, if you're gonna not have fun,
I mean the point. Yes, I get like. I get wanting to have like the most power in the game, and min max your character so that you're just like super powerful and you can just defeat everyone. But then at that point, you're not really having any fun, because you're not progressing, and you're not facing off against some kind of threat that's actually going to kill your character. You're just you're basically One Punch Man.
Yeah,
you go bald.
That's kind of something I'm struggling to implement in the game, is like basically incentivizing people to build their characters in ways that aren't just like straight min-maxing.
Mm-hmm.
And like there's one thing, like I have the where is it? I think it was called Specialist. The Specialist ability, which basically it lets you specialize in a type of creature, and it kind of encourages you to stick more to a single type rather than just picking and choosing what's optimal for whatever encounter you have. Like
you get bonuses for having that specific creature rather than having other kind of creatures.
You get bonuses for narrowing your focus rather than being a jack of all trades.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also the mechanic I have of training your creatures together that also kind of encourages that, because the whole gist of that is if you have different creatures that all share the same class, they can kind of train each other up rather than having you spend your experience to train each one individually. So it's almost like your character is the one who has the class levels, and those are imparted to the creatures. But It's not really how it works in game, but that's kind of the general idea.
Making me want to really play now.
What's that?
You're making me want to play it now.
Oh yeah, the general idea is for people to encourage specialization, right? Like the kind of trope you'd see in Pokemon, where you have a gym leader and they specialize in one type, and it's like, well, why would they do that? There's no reason to do that in Pokemon. It only makes sense to have a diverse team so you can cover all your bases. So I wanted to counter that and create something that encourages those themed characters. And I'm doing that with things like the specialist ability and
it's like they complement each other.
Rules.
Like,
right.
Because like in Pokemon games, there's times where you could play with two Pokemon if like you're facing like a two people, and you know how like you'll run up, they'll stop you, and then there's two people on each side of you, and you have to fight them both.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And like those are the only times I feel like you can actually maybe like cooperate, like have your Pokemon cooperate with one another. But then the different types of Pokemon, you have to have like a water type versus a fire type, and then an earth type versus like an air type or something like that. I don't. That's the other way. Wait, that's the right way, right? That's how the types work.
I don't remember. Don't matter.
But yeah, like it makes sense to have them like complement each other for like when you have like multiple characters, and also it works better inside tabletop RPGs rather than actual like video games, because like video games feels more like you need to have. It's like sometimes the system doesn't transfer over as well from a tabletop to like a video game. I mean, sometimes it does, though.
Yeah. The transference from video game to tabletop RPG is a big driver in a lot of the changes I had to make, because things have to make sense in the world. Yeah. Because the whole point of a tabletop RPG is that you can just do whatever, right?
Yeah. So
and you have to work around that, because the Pokemon thing is based on a very particular system. Mm-hmm. You have one Pokemon that goes against another Pokemon, and they fight. If you want to get another Pokemon out, you take the one Pokemon back and you send out a different Pokemon.
Do you do that in Creatures, or is there like just have at it, throw out all your creatures and see what happens?
That's the thing. I had to come up with ways to put limitations on it.
Yeah.
Because in Pokemon, there's no reason for that limitation except the game engine. Uh-huh. It's literally just, it's like the memes where the video game just doesn't make sense in real life. Mm-hmm. Like, you have to make it make sense in a tabletop RPG. And so, I've put the capacity rules in Creatures, so you can't just have your entire collection of creatures available to you at all the time. You have to attune them, and you can only attune a certain amount. Maxes out at 4 when you have the maximum capacity ability. Mm. So, and also, you have to wonder, well, what if somebody tries to do it anyways? I actually spent quite a bit of time last night writing up new rules to cover those things. Let's see.
Yeah, I know how that feels when when you have to go back and be like, crap, I need to change these rules.
You're looking at something and you realize, wait, what if they just don't follow the rules? Mm-hmm. And then it's like, oh, do I have a rule for that? Do I have a rule if they don't follow the rules? Because what's stopping them from breaking the rules, really? You have to build something into the game. So, we have the capacity thing, but then, what if somebody just grabs a crystal for a creature that they don't have attuned to them and summons it? Well, I decided, if you're not attuned to the creature, then it's basically like it's brain damaged. It doesn't function properly. It's not going to do what you tell it.
Its eyes are swirling.
It's going to stand around in a daze because you didn't properly attune yourself between the astral plane as a conduit to the physical being of the creature. So
for lore reasons,
sucks to be you. You tried to break the rules, but I have a rule for that. So yeah, and then there's the idea: what if if they have multiple creatures attuned, then what if they try to summon more than one? And I've decided, yeah, you can do that, but it costs you mana whenever you summon one beyond the first. Mm-hmm. So you can just go whole hog and throw out all 4 of your creatures in one battle, but it's gonna use up a limited resource. And mana is probably the most limited resource because you got to sleep to get that back.
Oh wow! I want to play now, dude. So when are you expecting to have your beginner module accessible for players to look through and potentially start their own little adventures?
I should be finishing up that weekend. Set the deadline at 2/22/2022.
Nice.
For memes mostly. Apparently, it also has astrological significance, but I didn't know about that at the time. But fingers crossed that has an effect.
Yeah. It'll be the day that the creatures are born.
Yes.
So how is your rolling system like?
The rolling system, it's a lot like World of Darkness again. I lifted a lot of the dice mechanics from that, but it's a little more complicated. Like in World of Darkness, what you do is you roll. You'll combine your skills and your stats, and that'll give you a dice pool. So you'll have multiple D10s that you roll. Just like throw out a handful of them, which is, it's a very fun mechanic just to grab a handful of D10s and roll them all.
Yeah. I have that same thing inside my game, but for my abilities, how it works is like you spend a specific amount of energy, and then you get, based off of the amount that you spend, you get a specific amount of dice that is corresponding to the rank of the ability that you have. So if you have like a rank 3, it uses D8, and you can spend up to 20 energy, and so like you can spend 5, 10, 15, or 20, and then you'll get 4 D8 max, and you can roll 4 D8, and then when you rank up to all the way to rank 5, it would be 6 D12. You can roll. So you could have like a full thing, just go at it. Sometimes that does slow down combat, so I made a combat system so that it speeds up combat, so that players can go at the same time and all that stuff. But I mean, people who a lot of people don't necessarily use many abilities unless you are literally like an ability user. Like you're like that kinetic. You use kinetics, and you're like go into a kinetic state, and you blast people with like energy and all that stuff. But yeah,
right.
Sorry.
So it's like a distinction between like D&D with the spell-based classes and the more physical basic attack type of things.
Yeah, but I made my system like so open that any even if you're a like your character's a physical, like you mainly just use physical stats, you can still end up learning new abilities. There's no limitation to it. So like it's like multi-classing on the extreme level, and it's all modular.
Right.
Yeah. But anyways, back to you.
I do like modularity.
Yeah.
Oh, what was I talking about? The dice mechanics?
The dice pools. Sorry, you guys.
Yeah. So you'll have your handful of D10s and roll them all, and then each
How do you
each
determine
roll you make,
how do you determine how many dice you have in a pool?
that will be a combination of two different stats, usually like a talent and a skill.
Okay.
So if you're using like a long sword or something, you'll roll fitness plus melee, and that's the combination of those is the amount of dice in the pool.
So if you
And
had
then-
like melee 5 and fitness 5, would you roll 10 d10? What?
Right.
Oh, okay.
10d10. Now that's a min-max build right there.
Yeah.
That's like peak of human performance. But then I guess there are little bonuses you can do to get more dice even beyond that.
And then when it comes to like on the game on the GM side for that, when let's say a player were to roll that, how do you determine like whether it's a success or a failure?
Okay, for skills and stuff, each one has like a target number to register a success.
Mm-hmm.
And that just kind of depends on how difficult the actual thing is.
Kind of like
gonna
like a DC system.
Yeah, kind of. Each one, like each thing will have kind of a difficulty and then a complexity. So difficulty is like how high you need to roll for each die. And then complexity is like how many times you need to hit the difficulty.
Oh.
So you might have
That's
something with like
interesting.
a difficulty of 4.
And you have to have like most of the dice, like a certain amount of the dice that you have rolling to hit 4 or higher, right? Kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, actually, usually we don't go as low as 4 with difficulty, but let's say difficulty 7 and then complexity of like 3. So you'll make your dice pool and roll it, and
You have to have
If
3
you-
7s.
you
rolled.
gotta get 3 7s or higher.
That's a
And
cool.
of course,
That's cool. I like that.
yeah,
I like that.
it opens up a little bit of what's the word I'm looking for? Even? Design space, I guess. It opens up design space.
Yeah.
So in the beginner module, let me bring this up, and I have some example. Well, a lot of it is just example skill checks and stuff.
Yeah.
So you've got some where it only has a complexity of 1, but then if you have multiple successes beyond the 1, you get additional bonuses. Then you've got others where it's like a cumulative thing, so it might be like a complexity of 4. But if you fail to hit it the first time, you can keep trying, and that cumulatively represents like eventually you're going to get it, but it's going to take you time. So there's a lot of little ways you can frame the little skill challenges in the mechanical sense. And that, I don't know how well that's going to go on the fly when people just need to like make something up. But I think once people are familiar with it, it's not that hard to kind of come up with off the top of your head.
I'm sure it'll be simple enough. Like honestly, the concept of that dice system is taken from the other game that what was it called?
World of Darkness.
World of Darkness, right? That
kind of like
I
think
how did you tweak it?
I think the old World of Darkness used a difficulty system, but the newer editions just have it as straight like 8, 9, and 10 are successes all the time. And then they just count those up, and then the amount of successes you hit depends on how well you do. It's a lot more free form. World of Darkness is kind of a pretentious game, honestly. It's made by like theater kids and stuff.
Oh, okay.
It's very gothy and all that. It's Vampire the Masquerade,
Yeah.
Werewolf and stuff like that. So, you get a lot of hipsters and beatniks playing it, and it's kind of geared for that kind of crowd. But I've kind of taken that and made it more crunchy.
I honestly like your system better than how that would probably play out. I like the concept of it being like you set an amount of dice that need to roll a specific number in order to succeed. I like that concept. I think that's just because I like complexity in games, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I have found that it's kind of hard to predict exactly how difficult a roll will be that way, but it's kind of fun. But so,
do you have like a chart? Do you have a chart that you've made for it? Like let's say like a very easy check would be this amount of dice succeeding on this number, kind of thing.
No, but I really should.
Yeah, I feel like that would be a good thing to have for GMs.
I need like an entire spreadsheet that goes for like the probability of how many dice you have, how high the difficulty is, how high the
That's the most complex part of the game.
Is just the spreadsheet. Just so I can be informed on how likely it is for certain characters to succeed at certain things.
You have like statisticians coming in being like, I'm sorry, but you got this wrong.
Yeah, well, if I can get the calculations, it wouldn't be that difficult.
No, it wouldn't.
You can just input that into the spreadsheet and you're good to go. Computer handles the rest. But let's see. Also, the things in combat, the dice rolls work slightly differently. One of the things I've done is basically give a flat amount of damage in like the hit descriptions
for the specific like weapons, right?
Right. So each power or weapon or anything that makes an attack, for each hit that you score against an enemy, then it will do a flat amount of damage, but that scales with each hit you do. So the standard is like 3 damage per hit.
Yeah.
So if you make 1 hit, you'll deal 3. If you make 10 hits, then you deal 30. Now that's really high.
Yeah.
But that's the general gist.
But one of my players did like 75 points of damage the other day, so.
Yeah.
But then again, like health is pretty high, like at late game when you can do that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah. That's kind of that's something I came up with to kind of streamline the combat.
Yeah.
Because not only in like D&D, not only are you making a roll to hit the guy, after you decide whether you hit or not, you have to make the damage roll and all that. But with this system, it's basically just one roll for everything.
Yeah. I had, when I was making my system, I was trying to figure out whether or not I should do like just a base damage amount kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But the issue like with that, it kind of, for my system, it just makes it so, makes it more, I wouldn't say difficult. It just it's not difficult. It's more just it doesn't allow you to do as much to like it basically, when you have a high level character and then facing off against like a lower level creature, I've found the balance to where like the low level creature can still actually handle high level characters if they play their cards right.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had it like just base damage, they would be wiped like clean right off the bat. And also how I do my armor system is very, because armor in my game has actual stats to it, so it actually makes it very important to have armor. And then so I do it you know how like armor class works in D&D, where like you roll to hit, and then if you get that number or higher, then you actually damage them, and if you don't, then you miss.
Right.
But in my game, I have it to where when you roll for damage, if the damage equals the armor rating or higher, then you actually damage the creature. But if you don't roll higher than the armor rating, then you damage the armor, and the armor takes just a few points of damage to its threshold.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely more complex than mine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the thing I like about the way I did it is that the whole rolling multiple dice for just everything, it allows you to get that like scaling of damage. So there's kind of a surprise element to it. Even if it's just a flat number in the description.
Yeah, because then you can have like multiple hits, and then you don't know how many hits you're going to actually be able to get until everything's calculated at the end.
Right. And your system actually it reminds me of Battle Brothers, actually. You ever heard of that one?
I have not heard of that one.
Oh, that's an indie video game. That's very I don't know, it's almost like a tabletop game, but it's
kind of like Baldur's Gate.
Loose sense. It's kind of what you'd call like a roguelike. I guess it has roguelike elements, but it's basically the idea that you're managing a company of mercenaries in like a medieval style world. And they have a system where like your armor is tracked on a separate as a separate like a health system.
Yeah.
So you might have like weapons that can ignore armor and go straight through and just deal damage straight to hit points.
Yeah.
And then you might have some that are more effective against armor, some that are less effective against armor.
Yeah, that's basically my system.
Right. And I like that as long as I'm not the one having to do the math. Yeah, it's a very good game, but I wouldn't want to deal with the mechanics all the time in my head.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out a better way to do it. I'm like kind of like trying to figure out if there's a more streamlined way to do it. But I also my whole thing was I want armor to matter inside the game. Rather than like how in D&D it feels like it, like you have armor on, like let's say you have like armor on, but it even then creatures can have like a plus 10 to hit, and it's like you buy plate armor, you have like a 20 AC, they're rolling like 25 and above basically every time. You're just like, oh crap, what am I supposed to do?
It's like you don't actually have protection if they can just score a hit all the time.
Yeah. So that's why I wanted like my armor system to really matter, so that it feels like, oh, armor really matters. If I don't have the armor, then I'm just going to be hit every single time, and then it's not going to be fun. But then there's also ways to circumvent, like get past the armor using like abilities or like certain types of weapons, certain types of like energy weapons and stuff like that. Because sci-fi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was I thinking? Oh yeah, for creatures, I'm still not entirely sure how I want to handle armor. I basically kind of just went with giving it a flat health bonus, and then kind of like applying penalties for heavy armor. But it's very simple. and probably more simple than I'd like it to be, but I don't know if the system can really handle much more complexity than that.
I feel like having it just stay simple would probably be good. I would have to test it out like myself to give like a full a good synopsis for you.
Yeah, one of the things I thought about doing was like basically giving armor types like creatures have.
Mm-hmm.
So, some might have resistances and weaknesses, but then I realized that was really kind of annoying to keep track of. And then, if you've got armor that has a lot of weaknesses, well, that's kind of a disadvantage. So kind of just started slapping resistances on as the main go-to for armor abilities.
Do you have metal creatures?
Metal creatures?
Yeah.
That's not a specific type, but there are creatures with metal on them. But I think creatures like that would go under the construct type, most likely. Maybe the earth type if they're more natural.
So how about let's go over the starting creatures that players can get.
Okay, yeah. Let's see. Let's see if I can bring up the right document for that. And there we go. Yeah, we got a basic water, plant, fire trio like Pokemon. But I've also got like kind of a secondary trio, which is meant to represent more like the local wildlife. And though the water, plant, fire is basically like creatures that have been imported from somewhere else and they're kind of domesticated. So you've got Glubble, which is basically just a blob. That's actually something I've thought a lot about, is how to make blobs look interesting and unique.
Yeah, I really
Got a couple blobs.
I really like your artwork for these things. It's so great.
Well, Global is just a grumpy bubble. A semi-solid blob of liquid with a grumpy Demeter. He's kind of the tank of the first group.
Oh, really?
His whole idea is that he's squishy and flexible, so if he gets hit, he just jiggles and wiggles and it doesn't really affect him. And as he goes up through the metamorphosis, he basically turns into a big humanoid blob, a big buff blob man, basically. And so his whole thing is basically like keeping enemies engaged with him and soaking up damage. And that's his whole shtick. And
he is a tank.
He also has some mobility ability to kind of slip and slide around and get to where he needs to be. Provide positioning bonuses to his allies and stuff. Then you got Flowsy, which is the plant one. He's basically a lizard with a flower around his neck and berries. Yeah. And, through his metamorphosis, he becomes basically like a Jurassic Park Dilophosaur, which is not an accurate Dilophosaur, but so the leaves on his, or the petals on his flower become like the I don't know what you'd call that, the hood that pops out when he's like spraying poison. And of course he has a spitter class for the poison part. That's kind of a tertiary ability of his. But then he's also got the ability to he basically has like solar beam type of stuff. He can photosynthesize. And then he's also able to swap between melee and ranged combat to some extent. He can attack in melee with his flower class. So basically slashing with petals and stuff. And then he's also got pollen spray abilities in addition to the poison spitting and stuff like that. So he's kind of based around the idea of a mobile attacker that can kind of adapt. Then you've got Torkish, which is kind of like he's a little kind of tiki torch looking dude.
Yeah,
basically.
I think he's my favorite out of them.
Yeah, he's a little guy with a flaming head, and his basic gist is that he's a glass cannon. He doesn't like to be in melee at all. He's not very good at it, but he's got like the highest damage rating, or attack stat out of pretty much any of the basic creatures you can start out with. But he's got a little bit of durability. He has the Golem class, which is a construct type. So that lets him get some melee ability and some survivability if you want to get that. And then, as he metamorphoses, that he basically just becomes bigger and a little buffer. Then we got the secondary ones, the undead, martial, and the psionic. This is basically the exact same weakness and resistance setup as the water, plant, and fire. So you got Cheapy, which is basically a scary vampire chick. I'm not entirely sure how I came up with this idea, but I think it started with the maximum of the highest metamorphosis, because he's a little more vampire-y. But his whole thing is that he's kind of like a gothy opera singer almost. And he has like a supernatural, I don't know, what do you call it when roosters do their crow at the morning? I guess the cock crows at dawn. That's the idea, except it replaced dawn with midnight.
Oh.
And
you don't want to be out at midnight.
No, you don't.
That actually sounds like a fun little session, planned out session. The players go out at midnight, because they we heard some noises out in the darkness. Some of our chicks got eaten. We don't know what happened.
Yeah, like a lot of the creatures have little kind of niches like that I tried to work in. But these guys, their main shtick is that they have a terrifying shriek or cry, like a crow, I guess. So they have powers that are very focused on kind of control, I guess. But then they also have the ability to attack with their beaks and stuff. So they can kind of push people away with the fear abilities and then charge them to strike in order to keep them from, getting mixed up too much in melee. And then, of course, they got vampire abilities to go along with the undead stuff. And at first, I didn't really design them with that way, but I went back and redesigned the whole line later on, and I decided to give them little fangs on their beaks to represent that. So, we're always changing things up a little bit as we like to notice things that don't really matter. But anyways, next one is the martial type. This is Arbo. He's basically a martial arts squirrel. And he's called Arbo because it's just taken from arboreal. He hangs out in trees. And, as he metamorphoses, he gets bigger and more buff, basically. And also, one thing I like about the design on this guy is his head is made to look like an acorn.
Yeah, that's why I was. That's why I thought it was. I was like, what does that look like?
And the thing is, I found this genius, not to toot my own horn or not, but he is simultaneously an acorn, a squirrel, and an Asian stereotype all in one. So I'm pretty proud of those designs.
You chose Marshall.
Each stage of the metamorphosis is based on a different kind of acorn with their hairstyles.
Oh.
So I'm pretty happy with the way they turned out. But anyways, this guy is kind of a tough damage dealing melee guy. He can kind of take hits and dish them out both. So he's very much into the engaging in melee, and it's pretty straightforward. I guess there's not much to say about it. Well, he's also got a beast class.
Oh, really?
Like this second trio, they all have a beast class is like a tertiary.
Okay.
So beast is kind of like the creature's equivalent of a normal type. I found it more flavorful and meaningful if we just called them beast.
Yeah.
So he's got the scamp class, which basically gives him some mobility to go with his melee stuff. So he's actually a lot like Cheapy, but more, or not Cheapy, Glubble. He's like a more damage heavy Glubble. And then last but not least, we got Psychic, the psionic type, and I went with psionic instead of psychic because it's more of a D&D thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is just a little kitten, and he's purple, and he has a little gem on his forehead, and he's very cute, and he's potentially deadly because the main thing they like to do is teleport, and if you combine a cat with the ability to teleport, lots of things end up off of shelves or off of cliffs or off of tree branches. But his whole thing is he's very mobile and he's very difficult to pin down, and he to attack from the range. But he's also got the beast class of the stalker, which is based on like predatory cats and stuff. And so it gives him some extra like mobility, but also it gives him some ability to fight in melee. And so he's not completely useless. And as he metamorphoses, the little gem on his forehead grows into an actual crystal horn.
Oh, really?
And he basically becomes a purple tiger at his maximum.
Oh,
level.
wait! Have you posted that on Mines?
I think so. I think I've posted all of these at some point or another.
I'd have to find it. I'd have to go all the way back.
Yeah, it was probably a long time ago. I don't know. But yeah, they all have their little out of combat abilities too. Like one of the things I've been trying to do is to give creatures little things that help out in role playing. So they're not just something that you break out during combat and then fight and then they go right back into their little crystals. And they actually have like a use and some role playing benefit. So like with Psychic, he can teleport, so he can get to all kinds of different places that you can normally get to. And Arbo has super strength, so he can break things down and stuff. Cheapy has night vision, and he's scary, so other creatures don't like to be around him and will try to avoid him, which might be helpful if you're trying to avoid wild encounters. And then Torkish, of course, he's got fire, which is useful in any situation pretty much. Flowsy grows food every day. And then Glubble is a blob that can just go wherever he wants because he can squish down and seep through cracks and all that. So they got little things that you can use in kind of creative ways if you've got the players that will actually do that.
Well, damn. That I really want to play. So if you ever need another player,
one of these days I might grab a few together and try out the beginner module on my channel. So I'll keep you in mind if I get that together.
I am totally down. I am totally down. Even if it's just for one session. I want to go and explore with my psychic. Well, Dicebag, thank you for coming on to the podcast. If you have anything to kind of shout out, like any places that my audience can find you.
If you're not sure if I'm somewhere, just search for Dicebag or Dicebag Games or Dicebaggery with 2 G's. But I'm mostly on Minds.
I'll make sure to link your Minds account, and also your World Anvil as well, so that people can see the creatures.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to stop using that pretty soon because, or at least not so much. Because I'm launching the Subscribe Star.
Oh yes.
I guess I should plug that too. So I got to make some of the stuff exclusive.
Yeah. Got to find a way to make money off of it.
Yeah, and the way World Anvil works is you have to like buy a really expensive subscription plan to have like any kind of exclusivity to it. So I'm not going to be able to really use that in conjunction with the Subscribe Star as much. So it's basically just going to be public information there. But other than that, everything's going to be coming out on 2/22/2022.
Which is in like 5 days.
5 days, yeah. I don't have much time to finish, but I think I'll be able to do it.
Yeah, I know that feeling. But like honestly, this is great. I really wanted to kind of dive deep into creatures, and I think we did just that. And I also I'm excited to play the beginner module, and I thank you for coming on to the podcast.
Yeah, no problem. Maybe I can have you on my channel sometime.
Of course. I'd be more than happy to come on and talk more tabletop RPGs. And talk more world building too, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you again.
Mm-hmm.
I thank you for listening to our conversation. If you'd like to hear more guest entries like this one, go over and become a free member at arthadiananthologies.com to not miss another episode like this. And if you're interested in becoming a guest yourself, you can fill out an entry form at the site's homepage. Until next time, travelers, be safe, stay safe, and if death comes to you, may you be reborn in power.